This is the vote that we've actually been waiting for. It's actually happening right now on the floor. So let's play a little of that sound, and hopefully we can get our viewers to see what's going on down there.
Yeah, this is Enid Green, former Congresswoman from Utah, who's the chairwoman of the Rules Committee, longtime Republican activist and leader in Utah. And she's now turned it over to... And now you see the reaction. They've called the previous question out of order. And now they're trying to exhort the Trump people on the floor to cheer and rally around the Rules Committee report that's on the floor. The boos you hear from the Never Trump crowd, who have given to the Secretary of the Convention a resolution with 11 states.
Back here by Colorado.
More than they need to qualify for a point of order that allows them to put into motion a request for a division of the House, which requires a roll call.
All right, let's listen into this.
Resolved that the report of the Committee on Platform be considered as adopted. Mr. Chairman, for purposes of explaining the report only, I am honored to yield to the co-chairs of the committee, Senator John Barrasso, Governor Mary Fallin, and Congresswoman Virginia Foxx.
I now have the honor of recognizing the chairman of the Platform Committee, United States Senator John Barrasso.
All right, Blinken, you missed it. So, Rick, just explain to us exactly what happened there, what we saw.
So there was a altercation in the Rules Committee on Thursday.
Although it seems like it's picking back up again. Hold on, let's play a little bit of this sound.
Is getting any word in.
All right, Rick, we just saw some really compelling images there. Mr. Cuccinelli, he took his badge off, his credentials.
Yeah, this is part of the protest. They anticipated being railroaded by the convention. They were qualified to be able to make this motion and have it voted on the floor of the convention.
But they got shouted down.
And well, what happened is the chair just blew right through it. And so now what they're chanting is an opportunity to try and be heard. And this is what happened on Thursday in the Rules Committee. They were not heard, and a resolution was passed to bind the delegates, which is a quite extraordinary thing. It's not been done for a long, long time in our party. And so this reaction was also from Donald Trump saying on Saturday, we crushed the opposition in the Rules Committee. And so now you're hearing the opposition responding to Donald Trump saying, we crushed you.
What they're thinking is why this makes sense. These are the very same people around the country who are going to need to be the engine for our nominee come in November and in the months leading up to November. So those who are calling for unity, those who are calling for unity, need to keep that in mind. If what they want is unity, treat us respectfully as delegates.
So I think the Trump folks knew about it. They have security on the floor, and they are just waiting. I think that's the next step you're going to see here is a removal.
It's not clear what they've done.
And we may actually be seeing that.
There's no one standing
and you hear the crowd cheering.
So your guess is as good as mine.
Well, one of the organizers and spokesman for this group is Senator Mike Lee. So you can only imagine the reaction removing a senator.
I had no right to occupy that podium, and I don't want to occupy the podium. What I want is a roll call vote, which is our right as delegates.
A big testament to I would say, Paul Manafort, and being able to organize these folks and get a lot of both, traditional GOP delegates organized and ready to go, because a lot of these folks, some of the Trump delegates have never been to conventions before. But now we saw, like Texas delegation, which went for Ted Cruz, they were ready.
Right.
They've been armed with information about what to do for the Trump campaign. So they definitely have won over a lot of delegates who were on the fence.
Oh, and we even saw someone try to take to the stage with a flag there. There you see people holding up banners. But it does appear, as you were pointing out, Rick, there you see somebody holding an American, actually looks like an American flag, baseball cap, but that the Sergeant-at-Arms has removed those folks that were attempting to get their voices heard, or at least the majority of them.
Yeah, I mean, this will obviously be well reported tonight and throughout the day as a moment of insurrection on the floor of the convention. I think it was eminently avoidable. I've done a number of these conventions for a long period of time, and one of the things you learn is that if you squeeze people into a position that really wasn't necessary, you're likely to create a revolt. Leslie was talking about Paul Manafort. I mean, his instruction to force a binding resolution on the Rules Committee on Thursday was unnecessary. Nobody else's name was going to be placed in a nomination at this convention. It was going to be for Trump. It was a level of precaution and guarantee, and also show of strength, that actually wasn't necessary.
Yeah, so why do something like that, Leslie? I mean, it doesn't. If there were no other names that were going to be thrown into the hat, why anger so many people?
They were not going to take any chances coming into this convention. That was it. We have to remember that was the reason Paul Manafort was really the man for the job. He knew how to have contested fights going back to the 70s. He was really familiar with this process, and you can't take anything for granted when you have a big division within the Republican Party who still feels that they're having a hard time getting behind Donald Trump. You can put Mike Pence there, you can do all you want, but I'm still hearing people say unacceptable, don't like it, maybe I'll vote for him. And now it's going to become a distinction between the alternative. And that's where Trump's going to win. When he starts comparing and contrasting with Hillary Clinton on selection of a Supreme Court justices, on what our military is going to look like in the future, then he's starting to win them over. But I think, to Rick's point, they're very precautious, and they probably should be.
Yeah, and we see here people on the floor, and as our banner says, the anti-Trump delegates making their last stand. Rick, I want to ask you, when we look at Donald Trump as a candidate, clearly his supporters are very vocal, they're very supportive. It's something we've been talking about all morning long. They feel like the people that they sent to Washington have not been able to get the job done on their behalf. That's why they're going with a non-traditional candidate. On the other hand, if Donald Trump is able to get on board with some of the things that are part of what Paul Ryan has said is the platform of the Republican Party, are some of those rough edges that people don't like, can those be smoothed away as long as he nominates Supreme Court justices that they like, as long as he gets behind getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like winning. When Donald Trump sewed up the nomination, one of the latest nominations to be sewed up in modern history, people came on board. We like to point out, because it's an interesting dichotomy, that there are senior officials in the party who don't support Donald Trump, but the vast majority of the party came on board. Many, many, many who didn't support him throughout his nomination. So there's nothing like winning. And if he won the presidency, I think you're going to see a remaking of the Republican Party more in the Trump image. If he doesn't win the presidency, the real question is, what impact will he have had on the party? And that's a much bigger open question.
Yeah, when we're talking about, which is can be a frightening scenario, the more in the Trump image. I don't know demographically if we're going to win in the long term with that strategy. I mean, you could say the same thing happened with the Tea Party. when the Tea Party favorites started coming forward, whether it was Sarah Palin or Ted Cruz or just numerous Tea Party candidates, and now it's not so much the Tea Party anymore. So these things have a life cycle that does eventually move through the system, move through the party, make some transformations, but now we're at a new stage, and we don't really know where this is going to go.
It feels, in a way, we've been talking a lot about, because we've focused a bit of our reporting on some of the potential protests that could happen outside here, and we've compared it to 1968, but I also wonder if there isn't a comparison to be made somewhere with 1964 with Barry Goldwater and his revolution, and how all of a sudden you had these states that were typically Democrats all of a sudden en masse leave the Democratic Party, go to become ultimately the modern Republican Party, but that very, very conservative strain of it just couldn't get traction back then.
Well, I think fundamentally you had, a totally different scenario in the sense that the Republican Party in 1960-64 was a moderate northeastern Republican Party, right? Our elected officials were on the eastern seaboard, not the south.
Right.
Democrats in the south proliferated. Southern Democrats were more conservative. And it was really, as you say, Barry Goldwater was trying to force the party to a place it was not prepared to go. Years later, under Ronald Reagan,
it did go there.
Kind of migrated that way.
Right.
But one of the divisive issues that Barry put on the table.
Stand by 1 second, Rick. We want to listen to what's happening on the floor here.
That we are able to discern the ayes from the nays. Those in favor of the rules package will say aye. Those opposed shall say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Casablanca plays out on the floor of the Republican convention.
I'm shocked.
Arrest all the usual suspects.
Exactly. All right, so the ayes have it there, Rick, and you're making the Casablanca reference. Round up the usual suspects. I'm shocked. This is happening here.
Actually, what was unusual is they retook the vote.
Yeah.
What's the point of that? I think it just, as you can now see, the protest starts all over again.
Yeah.
And it's just going to remind everybody that you've got a divided House. And that's a very odd way of trying to satisfy the never Trump.
How does it play? Now in the age that we live in with social media, and this is probably going to be one of the most covered conventions of modern times. How is this going to play to the rest of the country?
Well, I think that it depends upon how the night goes, right? If you have a really good story come out tonight about Donald Trump and his wife and on the stage together, it'll blow right through this. People don't usually get too obsessed with the process. But the media narrative will be hard on Donald Trump for this, right? Because I think it'll play out that this was an unnecessary distraction from today's otherwise coronation.
So the chair recognizes the delegate from Utah.
Chair of the Utah delegation, I make a motion that we have a roll call vote on the rules.
I second the motion.
The Secretary received requests from a total of 9 states requesting a roll call vote on adoption of report on the Committee on Rules. Subsequently, the Secretary received withdrawals, which caused 3 states to fall below the threshold required under the rules. Accordingly, the chair has found insufficient support for the request for a record vote. I need the script. The chair now recognizes the delegate from the state of West Virginia for the purpose of offering a resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Melody Potter from West Virginia, offering the following resolution and ask for its immediate consideration. Resolved that the report of the Committee on Platform be considered as adopted. Mr. Chairman, for the purposes of explaining the report only, I am honored to yield to the co-chairs of the committee, Senator John Barrasso, Governor Mary Fallin, and Congresswoman Virginia Foxx. Thank you.
I now have the honor of recognizing the chairman of the Platform Committee, United States Senator John Barrasso.
All right. All right, Senator Barrasso is now taking to the stage. So, Rick, Leslie, we have there our banner says anti-Trump delegates fail in last stand. Is this the last stand? Is this it?
Yeah, this is it. I mean, this was a particular thing they wanted to protest against their treatment in the Rules Committee. By and large, there aren't any other complaints that I've been able to discern. And they had their moment now. They've expressed their displeasure. And, you know, those who don't want to stick around will catch a flight home tonight, and those who want to go to the parties and have some fun will do so. So, I mean, I think this is about all you're going to see in this.
I think what's important is they wanted to be recognized while the media, the cameras were rolling. They did want this to be part of the national conversation, especially on social media, to show that this movement may stay alive, and they feel that they're planting seeds for 2020.
Right.
That many of these folks don't feel that they have the campaign ready to go to win in November. Obviously, everybody else disagrees with that, but for that reason, they are laying that groundwork looking ahead.
And it's something that you pointed out, both of you have actually pointed out. If Donald Trump wins, everybody falls into line. The party is unified, because that's what people have been saying. We need a unified party. If he doesn't win, if he fails at the polls in November, then there's going to be a lot of serious introspection with the Republican Party. Leslie, you were just saying that before that voting happened, that this is now, for a lot of people, becoming a party that is going away from the autopsy report that was issued in 2012. That report, just like the one before it, said, you know, we need to bring in more minorities, we need to bring in more women, we need to bring in more first-generation Americans that have parents born in other countries. If Donald Trump doesn't win, is that going to happen?
It's really hard to see that happening. I will say there are many people that fit those categories who like the leadership style, but he is underperforming with ethnic minorities. He's underperforming with women.
So can he win?
Can he win? He can win if he gets a lot of what Rick talks about, crossover Democratic male voters.
Because I saw something in the New York Times that said to get the white vote that he's been bringing to the tables from the primaries and the caucuses, he'd have to win 70%. That's a...
You're talking about moving 5, in terms of, you're losing 5 points here and picking up 5 points.
Right, in another state, right, in battleground Ohio or Florida.
But I think if the question is he loses and what happens, you know, you could look at what else has happened when other nominees have lost. When Bob Dole lost in '96, you know, the legacy wasn't continued to be Bob Dole's legacy. It was starting fresh.
Right.
And that was a tough loss. When John McCain lost, it wasn't that the McCain legacy continued on. Somebody new came in, and you had a brand new agenda, significantly different than John McCain's. And when Mitt Romney lost, you know, there was sort of a purge of the Romney people and the Romney ideas. And so I think the thing you've got to really understand is politics is a very dynamic thing. Just because Donald Trump spends a lot of his time on immigration and trade issues that are the antithesis of what a lot of the party believe in, doesn't mean that they can't pivot on a dime the day after the election if he's not elected and say, okay, there's a new way to win votes. Just like the autopsy after 2012's loss said, we need to reach out, we have to have a bigger tent, we've got to find more voters who are of color. That was all the right autopsy. It's just that they didn't get the nominee. They needed to actually implement that.
This is the distinction, is that is the right autopsy on the statewide level, and it's led to increases in Republican governorships. We have more now, winning state houses. They've really optimized a lot of that approach. What they also argue is we have not won a national election for the last 2 presidential cycles. It has to be kind of throw the cards in the air or try something different. We knew knew it would be an outside candidate. We knew it would be a third-way candidate, somebody who could shake up Washington. We didn't know it would be a third-rail candidate who was going to really electrify and create larger fissures than anybody could have imagined.
So we've been saying that this may be the last stand for the anti-Trump delegates, but the Delegates Unbound folks are telling people to walk out, and they're doing that via text message. I don't see a lot of people walking out, though, from my eyes. I mean, maybe, but I've been talking to the camera, so I don't know.
It's in the back of your head.
Yeah, right. Can do a lot of things, Leslie, but can't see behind me.
Yeah, it's especially hard to organize on the floor of a convention, especially if you're texting.
Text message.
So the days of old whips and delegate system is still far preferable than, I think, social media for floor organization. But that's just an old fart like me talking about the days gone by. But look, I mean, even if they walked out, so what, right? I mean, when I was organizing the floor operation at conventions, I like it when they walked out, because then I got my floor to myself.
Right, it's all you.
Don't let the screen door hit you on the way out. I mean, it's really not that bad.
That's great.
That's one way to do your business.
Yeah, exactly. Just have the room to yourself, and we'll talk business, we'll talk shop. It's also interesting, and it's something that I hadn't thought about, Rick, because I'm obviously not a politico like you guys are, but it's something when I saw Jerry Ford give his acceptance speech in 1976, and then he called
was a Republican platform which told...
definitely right, and very cognizant, because in my school we did these little school voting things you used to do in school. They still do those, so we got to vote like who would be president, Jerry or Jimmy Carter. But I remember, and I watched it again on C-SPAN last week, let me admit that, he had Reagan come down and deliver a speech, and it was interesting because the speech that Jerry Ford gave in accepting the nomination of the Republican Party was very different than the speech that Ronald Reagan gave as a sort of a gesture of goodwill that Jerry Ford gave him. It really, I hadn't thought of that. It really sort of put into focus what he planned to do when he became president after Carter's defeat.
Yeah, I hate to admit it, but I was at that convention.
You were at that convention, yeah?
Yeah, I was the college Republican chairman of Alabama.
I got to look for you in the C-SPAN archives.
Yeah. Well, I had no gray hair in those things. And you're right. I mean, it was the kind of thing where an effort to try and unify the party was based on giving Ronald Reagan an opportunity to address the delegates and basically being patient and saying, you know what, tell them what you want to tell them, because just the fact that you address them on my podium, President Ford said, is enough to bring your delegates and my delegates together. And that was even a more divided convention than this one. But it comes in different forms and shapes. And so this is not that convention, right? And this is going to be all about Trump all the time. And that's his style, and that's the schedule that we've been given, and you can anticipate that being the rest of the convention.
Let me just say that our own Major Garrett and John Dickerson are on the floor right now talking to delegates. We're going to try to get them and talk to them about what's actually going down there below us. But yeah, that's an interesting point, that it has moved away from that scenario where you might, although you're going to have Senator Cruz is going to be here, and a lot of people are wondering, why is Ted Cruz delivering an address at the GOP convention when he called Donald a serial philanderer and some of the things that was going back and forth between the two camps. Others have said, why not? This is a way for him to stake out his claim in the next 4 years, next 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back at Christie's speech during the Tampa convention, he didn't even mention the nominee's name. It was all about Christie's future, not the nominees. And so these are always platforms for the advancement of future nominees. And I have no doubt that Ted Cruz was not dissuaded by his performance in the nomination. If anything, he's probably motivated to look at running for president again someday.
All right.